Hi everyone, and welcome to, another evening edition of the Pisces Guide to Pop Culture. As you can probably tell from what I'm holding up right now, I want to talk a few minutes about Nonnas, the new film on Netflix, starring Vince Vaughn. Now, I have to say at the beginning that I'm not a huge fan of Vince Vaughn. Never have been. I always found him a bit too just grating and annoying in general. But I will say that he's a little bit more subdued in this version or this movie, which I was kind of surprised by. So in this movie, he plays Joe Scarvella, who I had to look it up because sometimes I don't remember character names. Who, after losing his mother and his grandmother, ends up starting a Italian restaurant in Staten Island that is going to be staffed by nonnas, by grandmothers, and who will, sort of cook their traditional Italian cuisine. And, he wants to do this both to, cope with his grief, but also to, give back to the generations and establish this kind of intergenerational dynamic in this restaurant. And it is based on a true story, which is quite lovely. Now, like I said, going in, I had a feeling I would like it because I love stories about grandmothers and old people and old ladies. I mean, The Golden Girls is my favorite show of all time, so, that probably goes without saying. And to be quite frank, I love this movie. In many ways, it felt like a throwback to the 90s when we had a lot more of these, very funny but very poignant and sort of low stakes stories that were meant to convey something important, but they didn't sort of beat you over the head with how important it is. Like, it wasn't like, not every movie had to be this grand statement or this grand piece of masterpiece cinema. And I really think that Hollywood as a whole has kind of lost sight of that, the power of those kinds of stories. So, there's a lot to love. I mean, this cast list is just an embarrassment of riches. You have Susan Sarandon, Lorraine Bracco, Talia Shire, Linda Cardellini, Brenda Vaccaro, Joe Manganiello. A real A-list of, great talent. And I mean, I will admit that I was particularly excited to see Brenda Vaccaro, obviously a staple of a lot of 1980s TV, and, perfect for playing an Italian grandmother. And I mean, I'm not Italian. I'm as, Northern European as it gets, unfortunately. But, I have, there is a pretty significant Italian population in the Northern Panhandle of West Virginia where I grew up. So, I'm familiar with Italian American culture. And one of my best friends is also Italian American. So, I just felt like that. But more importantly, I think that there's a real power to this film in terms of like our grandmothers. And that's the thing I really want to talk about for the most of this episode is, as I alluded to when I did talk a few weeks ago or a week ago here at TikTok and the Pisces Guide about, why grandmothers and mothers are so important. Like, I was very, very close to my grandmother, and food, of course, is one of those intergenerational binding factors that sort of brings people together, even when you may not entirely understand or agree across generational lines. It is food that I think connects us in a really important way, and that's clearly the case in this film. And one of the most affecting moments is very early. The very first film scene that we get has a young Joe kind of like going and getting the pastries for his mother and his grandmother, and then going to their Sunday dinner where they have the gravy, although Northern European Americans would call it sauce, basically. And you have this really powerful moment between young Joe and his mother and his grandmother, and it's clear how much this relationship means to them all and how important it enduringly is for Joe as he gets older and has to like grapple with grief and the loss of both of these really key women in his life, and how to sort of make good by them, to how to like keep that alive. And I mean, that's the real emotional power of this movie, is it reminds us like it's really valuable to reconnect with our families. And for many of us queer viewers in particular, that can be very vexed. But I think that, there is still power in familial bonds and in acknowledging what previous generations gave us. And that's something I think the film conveys quite well. It's also, it's a very funny film. There's an amazing moment where two of the Nonnas start like going at each other in the kitchen of this, fledgling restaurant that they're trying to build. And they're sort of throwing food at each other, and then a lamb's head catches, or sheep's head catches on fire, and it's a whole big mad mess. And then there's a equally poignant moment when we have the Nonnas, led by Susan Sarandon's character, who gives them all sort of a makeover, and they're all kind of speaking about their families and, what their stories are. Like, Susan Sarandon's character has had a double mastectomy and has implants, and Brenda Vaccaro is, her husband is deceased and her children are scattered, but she still loves them. And then there's, another character who was a lesbian, but was also a nun. And then, the last of them is also like really has a complicated relationship with her family. So, you know, it was very poignant. And I just really love movies like this that are just really heartfelt and rich and textured. You know, I'm using kind of food metaphors here because I think that's appropriate. And it has a happy ending, you know, not to spoil anything, but, you know, the restaurant makes it. It's still in business in real life on Staten Island. And, you know, there's a love story that doesn't, you know, doesn't take over the film. Like, this is not a romantic comedy per se, but there's a nice little romance. And, I mean, Linda Cardellini is always there. And there's, you know, I appreciate the way this film handles grief and that, you know, grief doesn't operate according to a specific timetable. Like, it takes all of us different speeds to get over the losses that we endure. And so I really appreciate that this film doesn't rush. It's an hour and, you know, 40 odd, maybe almost 50 minutes. And, you know, in another film that might feel too long, but I felt like this was a movie that I enjoyed spending time in. It's a movie that I felt like I could just relax and embrace it and just enjoy while also thinking about these deeper things. And this is what I miss about a lot of movies in Hollywood today. Like, I miss the 90s when I was young and growing up, because you had these movies were like a dime a dozen. Like, there was a whole sort of movement in the late 90s and 2000s of these comfort movies that, you know, were thought-provoking but also rich, and they spoke about food and culture and heritage, like, you know, movies like Chocolat. And anywho, I really enjoyed Nonnas, and I really felt it allowed me to commune with my grandmother, you know, for a little while. Like I said, food was really important to her, and I, you know, haven't figured out how to make her chili yet, but I'm still trying. And, you know, my parents and I sort of try to keep her memory alive by making the foods that she enjoyed and that she made for all of us. And so I really think that if, like me, you have a really powerful and, you know, important relationship with your grandmother or with your mother, I think that there's a lot to enjoy about Nonnas. It's sweet, it's funny, it's delicious, it's everything you could want from a sweet food movie like this one. So I definitely recommend it if you can watch it. It's on Netflix. You know, just enjoy the feelings and enjoy the love and all the poignant romance. So anyway, and, you know, the lovely familial stuff too. So anyway, enjoy all of it. Highly recommend it. It gets the Pisces Guide to Pop Culture seal of approval. So that's all for tonight. I'm TJ, and of course I'll see you tomorrow with more gabbing about whatever thing has moved me now. So anyway, take care, y'all.